I want to ask you about the Epstein files. Have you seen the Epstein files?
I have not reviewed the entirety of it myself, but a good amount.
At 2:17 p.m., the hearing had already been going on for hours. Everyone in the room was exhausted, senators were tired of asking questions, journalists were tired of taking notes, and cameramen were tired of filming. Kash Patel, however, felt a sense of relief. He had managed to get through the toughest questioning from the most dangerous senators, Raskin, Goldman, Ted Lieu, and Robert Kennedy. Somehow, he had survived it all. But there was still one senator left. John Kennedy, a Republican from Louisiana and known as a Trump ally. No one was worried about him. Patel certainly wasn't. And that turned out to be his biggest mistake. Kennedy began with his usual calm and gentle smile. Director Patel, I want to ask you something very simple. Have you ever seen the Epstein files? It sounded like an easy question. But what followed changed everything. Kennedy began laying out access logs, phone records, and a timeline that connected a White House call to a closed investigation on the very same day. In doing so, he dismantled every defense Patel had built. Watch this video until the end, because in the next few minutes, you'll see how John Kennedy cornered Kash Patel with questions he already knew the answers to. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. In this hearing, a senator caught an FBI director lying about whether he had seen a file, and then proved it using official access logs. John Kennedy is not what he appears to be. Yes, he's a Republican senator from Louisiana and close to Trump, but that's only part of the story. Before politics, Kennedy spent years as a law professor. And from that background, he developed a powerful habit: he never asks a question unless he already knows the answer. In legal terms, this is called a controlled examination. Every question is carefully planned, along with the expected answer. You don't destroy your opponent directly, you let them destroy themselves with their own words. Kennedy uses this technique masterfully, yet most people don't notice it. Why? Because he always speaks calmly and politely. He smiles. He sounds conversational. But in reality, he's executing a strategy. The setting, a House hearing room, hours into testimony. By this point, Patel had already been questioned by multiple senators. Raskin challenged him on his signature. Goldman confronted him with documents. Ted Lieu cornered him with sharp, methodical questioning. Robert Kennedy pressed him directly. Did Trump order it? By now, Patel understood that every word mattered, that every answer could be a trap. But he misunderstood one crucial thing: the traps he expected came from opponents. John Kennedy didn't seem like an opponent. And that made him the most dangerous one of all. Kennedy glanced down at his file, slowly turning the pages. Then he looked up and smiled. Director Patel, let's begin with something simple. In fact, perhaps the simplest question in this entire investigation. He paused. Have you ever seen the Epstein files? Patel wasn't expecting this at all. Other senators had asked complex, detailed questions: who ordered it, why it stopped, who the names were. But Kennedy was starting from the beginning. Patel hesitated. He chose his words carefully. Senator, I have reviewed summaries of the Epstein files. No, Kennedy interrupted gently. I didn't ask about summaries. I asked, have you seen the files? With your own eyes? Patel paused. For the first time, he truly hesitated before answering. Senator, the files are in our electronic system, Director Patel. Kennedy raised his hand slightly, just enough to stop him. I asked a very simple question. And you're talking about the system. Kennedy then pulled out a document. There is a physical room at FBI headquarters. In that room, there are Epstein files. He held up the page. This is the FBI's internal security record, an access log for every physical file room. And here it states, Epstein Physical Archive Room, Room 714, FBI Headquarters, B2 level. He looked directly at Patel. Is this room accessible? Patel hesitated. Yes. Good, Kennedy replied. And are there physical Epstein files in that room? Yes. Kennedy leaned forward slightly. Have you ever been in room 714? The room fell completely silent. Everyone understood what had just happened. The question sounded simple, but no matter how Patel answered, he was trapped. If he said yes, what did he see? Why didn't he act? If he said no, how had the FBI director never reviewed the most critical files in his own building? Let's pause here. If you've made it this far, hit the like button, because what Kennedy just did was remarkable. He didn't accuse. He didn't argue. He simply asked. Is this conversation helpful so far? He only asked two simple questions, but those two questions were enough to trap Kash Patel. And now I want to hear from you. why would an FBI director avoid visiting the physical archive room containing the Epstein files? Share your thoughts in the comments, I'm genuinely curious. When Patel didn't respond, Kennedy didn't interrupt. He simply waited. It was a long pause. Then Kennedy slowly shook his head. All right, let's assume you didn't enter the room. Did someone brief you? Did you receive official information? Patel hesitated. Yes. When? Kennedy asked. In the first week of my tenure. The first week, Kennedy repeated calmly. Great. He reached for another document. This is the FBI's onboarding record for new directors, the official briefing schedule for their first week. He turned the page toward the camera so it could be displayed on screen. And here, under the Epstein briefing, there's a note. The room leaned in. Briefing completed. Director acknowledged receipt of all materials, including access to the physical archive, room 714. Kennedy looked back at Patel. So, Director Patel, this record shows you were granted access to room 714. Access granted, yet you're saying you never entered? Patel's lead attorney leaned over and whispered something to him. Senator, Patel replied, being granted access is not the same as physically entering. Yes, Kennedy said immediately. You're absolutely right. Those are different things. It almost sounded like he was agreeing with him. These are the FBI's digital access logs. They record who accessed which file, when, and from where. He paused, scanning the page. And here, Director Patel, we have something interesting. He lifted the document. February 3, 2025, 7:34 a.m. FBI Director's Office. Terminal number 4471. Access to the Epstein master file. He paused again. Director's Office. Terminal 4471, is that your personal terminal? The room went completely silent. Patel tried to remain composed, but the tension showed on his face. Yes. So, on February 3 at 7:34 in the morning, the Epstein master file was accessed from your personal terminal. Kennedy leaned forward slightly. And just moments ago, when I asked if you had seen the file, you said, I reviewed the summaries. He paused. Director Patel, what were you doing at 7:34 that morning? Patel opened his mouth, but no words came out. Kennedy didn't rush him. He simply waited, still wearing that same calm smile. Let me add one more thing. He pulled out the final document. February 3, 2025. Does that date mean anything to you? Patel swallowed. This is the day you signed the directive that halted all Epstein-related investigations. Kennedy placed the paper on the table. 7:34 a.m., you access the file. 2:30 p.m., you suspend the investigation. He paused again. You saw it in the morning, and you shut it down in the afternoon. Kennedy slowly shook his head. So you did see that file, Director Patel. And after seeing it, you closed it. The room fell into complete silence. Patel's attorney shifted, as if preparing to stand, but Kennedy raised his hand. One moment, counselor. Your client hasn't answered yet. He turned back to Patel. Why did you stop it? No response. Why? Still no judgment in his voice, just the same calm tone. I'm not here to pressure you. But there is a simple truth here. He leaned slightly forward. You opened a file in the morning, and you closed it in the afternoon. Why was that decision made? Patel remained silent. Kennedy sat back, waited, then gave a slight nod. All right, let's try another angle. He continued, Director Patel, before 7:34 a.m. on February 3 RD, who did you speak with that day? Patel hesitated again. Kennedy didn't wait this time. Let me help you. He lifted another document. These are the phone records between the White House and the FBI Director's Office on that same morning. He pointed to the timeline. 6:15 a.m. to 6:48 a.m., a call from the White House National Security Council to your office. He paused. And less than an hour later, you accessed the Epstein master file. Another pause. Phone call first. File access next. Then the directive. The implication hung heavily in the air. 3 steps. All on the same day. Kennedy looked directly at Patel. What did they say to you on that phone call, Director? Patel opened his mouth, but no words came out. He closed it again. His attorney leaned in and whispered something. Everyone in the room knew what was coming, executive privilege. Kennedy raised his hand slightly. Director Patel, I want to be precise here, because this term has been used repeatedly today. Executive privilege protects conversations with the president, that's true. He leaned forward. But let me ask you this, can executive privilege be used to shut down an investigation? Patel said nothing. Kennedy slowly tapped the table with his fingers. The White House calls. You open the Epstein file. And then you close the investigation. He paused. That's not a decision, Director. That's an order. Another pause. Executive privilege can protect a conversation. But it cannot protect an order. Kennedy stopped speaking for a moment. Because the order is on record. He closed the file and placed it on the edge of the desk. Then he looked at Patel, silently, for several seconds. Director Patel, I'm going to ask you one final question. And you need to answer it. Because if you don't, the phone records, the access logs, and the directive, all from the same day, will speak for you. He paused. And they speak louder than I ever could. The room was completely silent. Then Kennedy asked, calmly, clearly, and slowly, Director Patel, after you saw that file, when you signed that directive, on whose behalf were you acting? Every eye in the room was fixed on Patel. Patel looked at Kennedy. He opened his mouth. Executive, no, Kennedy interrupted, raising his hand. Executive privilege is not a name, Director. I want a name. Patel couldn't respond. His mouth remained slightly open. His eyes slowly dropped. And in that moment, the silence said everything. Because sometimes, not answering, is an answer. Kennedy leaned back in his chair. He closed his file and turned to face the room. American people, are you hearing this? February 3, 2025. 6:15 a.m., a call from the White House. 7:34 a.m., the Epstein file is opened. 2:30 p.m., the investigation is shut down. He paused. This isn't a theory. These are records. The phone log. The access log. The signed directive. And Director Patel, under oath, has not denied any of it. Kennedy returned his attention to Patel. Director, I didn't come here to attack you. I came here to find the truth. And today, just by asking questions, I found it. Now the room understood everything. Patel had accessed the Epstein master file from his own terminal at 7:34 a.m., yet he claimed he had only reviewed summaries. The records proved otherwise. A call from the White House came earlier that morning at 6:15 a.m. By 2:30 p.m., the investigation was shut down. He invoked executive privilege, but he never gave a name. On whose behalf were you acting? He never answered. There was no shouting. No dramatic confrontation. Just questions. And those questions quietly dismantled every defense Patel had. John Kennedy didn't accuse. He didn't argue. He simply asked, have you ever seen the Epstein files? Patel said, I reviewed the summaries. But the digital access logs told a different story. They showed that Patel accessed the Epstein master file from his personal terminal at 7:34 a.m. on February 3, 2025. The timeline was clear: 6:15 a.m., White House call 7:34 a.m., file access 2:30 p.m., investigation closed. Then came the final question, on whose behalf were you acting? Patel invoked executive privilege. But gave no name. No answer. If you've watched this far, share this video. This is what controlled examination looks like, using nothing but records and questions to reveal the truth. Subscribe, because next, we'll analyze what may have been in that file, why the White House called that morning, and what that final question really means. On whose behalf were you acting? Patel couldn't answer. Because sometimes, silence is the loudest answer of all. And sometimes, a simple question, have you ever seen the files? Is all it takes to expose the truth. John Kennedy asked the questions. The record spoke. And Kash Patel had no answers.